Thank you for sticking with us, getting the players ready and into game. It is once again Tyler up against Posesi for our second match of the day, finding out who's going to be going through to the finals to face up against Surrender after his absolute clean sweep of Kin, sending him down to the elimination bracket. And after telling Tyler to get off his butt and get ready into game, I believe we are all ready to go.
Did you get any chance to him why he's not banning Warrior instead of assuming his intentions, Derek?
I didn't know. I said I'm making fun of him constantly on stream, and then he told me that he's actually beaten Posesi 2-0 so far in the Swiss rounds so far, and that Posesi right now is probably soiling himself. I'm of course using much more polite language than Tyler used when he messaged me. So do with that what you will, Gia.
Man, I was
some
very
trash
excited.
Talk going around.
I was very excited to have Alan in GM because I thought he'd be throwing around the BM, but you know, Tyler has us covered. In that time while we were waiting for them to get set up, though, I did put together a theory, and it's more just like I'm more sure that he's confident in not banning Warrior because he has Druid, and it sort of parallels Surrender's strategy somewhat, that he doesn't have Warrior himself, but he does have Druid as a potential counter into it.
Already kicking things off with the Mage up against the Priest. For Posesi, taking a look at the list, it's the... well, it's actually kind of an interesting build. Star Scryer being run in there, which hasn't been part of the deck since the earliest iterations of Tempo. Or I guess even like Mozaki Combo Mage is the last time that I saw Star Scryer being run. I'm sure that most of the Tempo Mage players would have some pretty choice words about that particular inclusion from Posesi. But just having a bit of extra cycle in the deck, making it really lean and clean as an archetype overall, I think it does have some merit.
I'm glad you spotted that, because that makes me think immediately, why not include Blood Mage Thalnos? Because that's also a 2-mana card that draws a card and it has spell damage.
Yeah.
So something of synergy in its deck. Of course, it doesn't tutor out a spell specifically. So Posesi is hoping to get specifically cards that draw even more cards, so the double Arcane Intellect lend itself to that strategy as well. And that's something you can run, I believe, more confidently if you're expecting slower matchups to come up, and particularly Priest is one of them.
Weirdly enough here, talking of like slower matchups versus faster matchups, Posesi here with this hand, I think really wishes that he was playing against an aggro deck, because this is the kind of hand that just locks down any board. No matter how much they've developed at the start of the game, you will win the board with this much mana that you're discounted off Sorcerer's Apprentice. Against Priest, however, what you really, really, really want with this hand above anything else is Mana Cyclone. You need to be using these cheap spells to generate the extra oomph, the extra value, the extra damage off of the burn spells as well to get over the finish line. Because I think if you just go toe-to-toe, card for card up against the Highlander Priest, the cards in your deck will not get the job done. You need to be generating more value.
I absolutely agree. If this was an aggro rogue that he was facing out on the other end, then he would absolutely just rip the Apprentice here, play a bunch of cheap spells, and you're more than likely to clear their entire board and end up ahead on board with the Apprentice and the lab partner. And that's enough to snowball you in the game, because having the board and just being ahead every single turn from it can be enough. But against these slower decks that run reactivity, that can clear your Apprentice, and then you have no refill in that world, it's just not enough. So Posesi needs that last piece of the puzzle, the Mana Cyclone, to make sure that the net value lost is not very much at all.
Do you want to know what I just saw as the last message Tyler sent me before he queued up his game? This guy is so free. I've out-queued him already. Can you believe the level of disrespect that he's throwing down against one of the best players in APAC? Disgusting.
And rightly so, Posesi has drawn the Mana Cyclone to show Tyler up.
This is disgusting. Evocation.
Oh my
I didn't even pick it. What is happening?
I picked it to make the Solarian free, I suppose.
I guess so,
in this turn as well. It's okay. The Cyclone's just gonna generate another evocation. Let's just watch the fireworks go off.
Oh, Shenvala!
It's not playable this turn, but it can come down next turn potentially.
I mean, what's going to be playable this turn is
Giant
if he wants it with Ray of Frost.
Oh my gosh, but he has to go. He's just thinking about, oh, should I Ray of Frost first? Should I Brain Freeze the first point? You just play cards. That's just how the mage works.
Whoa!
Ending turn with full hand. He didn't have a target for the ding missiles, but the Giants are super cheap. Tyler has this Pyromancer to start cleaning up, but oh my gosh, what a turn.
But the Elucia as well is insane. What? Does he go for it here? I mean, obviously he doesn't have an apprentice on his side of the board.
Yeah, major caster vision, Derek. Tyler
I know.
Staring down all of these spell damage minions and the apprentice. I think he has to pyro them away.
Alright, fine.
And then he just rips the illusion. I look stupid. Okay, how does he go about this? We're looking at Pyro, Holy Smite, the 1/6. He can Embalming to bring back the Pyro, and then renew to close the turn.
Sure.
That looks like a full clear. Okay, Embalm first. That works too. Okay, renew the Pyro, and then so this way he ends with a Pyro in hand.
Ray's dead is very juicy.
This also means he doesn't have to Holy Smite now. If he is fine with leaving up Mana Reservoir, I think you can make arguments for that. But then the Ray's dead is not really getting any value, so he plays it anyway. Oof! Big oof.
I mean, I know that I agree with you that the play that last turn as casters was just to sit back and enjoy the fireworks from Posesi in terms of what was going on. But there was a lot to pick up on in that turn. We're talking about the decision to go Apprentice in the first place, going for a Cyclone with that many cards in hand, overdrawing, whereas he could have gone Cyclone first and then played a spell afterwards. Like, so much stuff that could have been picked up on. And the result of it is he doesn't have an Evocation, which is a pretty big deal in its own right. And also he's now just overdrawn Solarian Prime, which is devastating.
He didn't have an extra evocation. I think it's still fine, the line that Posesi ended up going for. I'm just not sure about the order, because he could have technically held off until that 0-cost Solarian was the last card he played and not have overdrawn the next card. But I don't mind him not taking evocation there, because he still has this Arcane Intellect to get the natural one in hand. And he also has this Azure Explorer to discover. And what I especially like is he held back on the other Mana Giant, because this is going into the Soul Mirror turn.
I mean, that's the big thing, right?
Actually the nuts here for Posesi.
It's true. It's pretty good. You just, I mean, it's just threats every turn. It's you put enough to warrant removal every turn, but you don't overextend. It's just classic anti-control play as a mid-range tempo deck.
And the Gruul is just short. I mean, it's just out of range of the Siamat plus 1/1 trading into it for a nice, clean removal of the biggest threat for Tyler there. The Soul Mirror also didn't feel like it was worth it, because it was just essentially clearing the Gruul and the Cobalt. So Tyler is going to ignore this for now, set up for a better mirror. Looking greedy, but I think if he just went for Soul Mirror there and there was any follow-up from Posesi, which he knows there's a Conjurer's Calling, Tyler ends up behind anyway.
Yeah, I can agree with that. But now, of course, this is where Posesi's hand really kind of starts to unlock. He doesn't have all the mana he'd want to work with, obviously, to get this done, but just like Conjurer's Calling, Ray of Frost, I guess that's already maybe overextending just a little bit.
Yeah, there's also a Shinvala line he can do with the... Oh, I suppose there's not enough mana. I don't hate the look of the Conjurer's Calling. However, Posesi really wants to send this 9/9 to the face. So, of course, with Conj, you ideally want to value trade something and then Conj the thing that value traded down. But if it's going to be the Twin Tyrant that's value trading, it still has a lot of health on it anyway. So I'm also able to see this line where he just holds off on going the Conj this turn.
Yeah, just Ray of Frost on the 4/5, you'd have to imagine, to freeze it in place, get this damage to the face. I think this is very nicely done. And the pickup of Apprentice and Evocation in one fell swoop. The possibilities truly are endless here.
Oh my goodness. The next onslaught of spells will be coming hard and fast against him. He might be pushed into the Soul Mirror corner as early as now.
That
It's
is,
a cute
however,
play. He can inner fire the Twin Tyrant, then Soul Mirror.
that's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty cute, right?
That is pretty cute. I mean, the other play you could have gone for, again, I am letting Cast Division get to me here, was Mind Render Alusha and do all of the broken stuff that Posesi wants to do right back to him.
I feel that that would be a last resort because, again, he can have no way of knowing that the second apprentice was in hand by that point.
Agreed.
All right.
Boring, but agreed.
Yeah, story of my life. Okay, Posesi's holding back on another turn for the apprentice because he sees a very strong alternate line of... Oh! Generating Hulking over Fiend is a very strong alternate.
Yeah, it was really annoying with the way that the Firebrand did work out there.
It's fine. He can clear
It
off
is
the
fine.
board, maintain a lot of threats, build his little lab partner to the face.
I'm just wondering if you go with Ray of Frost instead of even trading. Like, I know that you've seen Soul Mirror already.
I think Posesi might want to save this for a guaranteed one more Shenvala activation because there are some evocations that give you nothing cheap. It would have to be pretty terrible. So he
Let's
does
play around
end up
Siamat.
using it in the end. Sure.
Quite nicely is a pretty big deal.
Alacron drawn for Tyler.
Yeah, and quite importantly, at level 2, it's going to kill 2 minions here, I believe, due to the 2 Disciple of Galacrons being played.
I wonder.
Which is tempting, for sure.
If he misses and the 5/8 sticks on board, it's definitely in scary territory, especially since he doesn't have any renew in hand. But alternate lines of removal still don't get rid of the 5/8. So he's just gonna flip the coins. Oh, 2 worst outcomes. Yikes.
Yeah.
Who's soiling himself now?
Free matchup, is it, Tyler? Too easy, is it, Tyler?
Evasive. Man, if you could just get another dragon for this Malagos.
Yeah, I
But-
know, it would be insane.
I was looking at the evasive there instead just to be the play for the next turn if he doesn't want to pop off yet with the apprentice. It looks that Posesi has noticed for several turns now that Tyler's had suboptimal answers to his board, still leaving up minions here and there. So Posesi's just piling on the pressure. Smells blood.
Absolutely, and I think it's great recognition on what the point of this apprentice evocation is, which I think at this point isn't even to activate Shenvala. Like, it just doesn't really matter anymore. The point of this is to find, ideally, any burn spells you possibly can. Fireball, Frostbolt, Pyroblast, although I guess that wouldn't quite be playable. And secondly, just being able to play Power of Creation and Deep Freeze for big extra boards that you can throw down. Every single one is a huge deal.
And I'm seeing an okay clear for Tyler. He can go Shadow Madness on the taunt, Tiamat, Wind Fury, kill the Ross, and trade into the 8, and then the 3/6 trades into the 5/8 too. I suppose it still lives at the end of that, so it makes it a little bit awkward, but I mean, he'd get rid of Ross and the hulking over Fiend, which is the big deal here.
Also just get rid of the 2/3 for that little bit of extra damage removal.
Okay. I'm not sure if I would have done it that way around. The other line, I think, still leaves 5 damage on board, but it also leaves spell damage, which is a relevant thing to be scared of for Tyler.
Is it cold in here? Or is it just me?
But Posesi, I was looking at going for the evasive Draconid line, but instead he is popping off right now, activating the Shenvala. Not that it even matters though, because Fireball closes things out after, as is always the case, a crazy, a messy, but a very impressive mage game there to defeat the priest.
I really thought you were gonna go for the rhyme there, Dara. Crazy, a messy, but a very Posesi way to win that game.
I did say that, and you have no evidence to prove otherwise. I'm a lyrical genius,
We're
okay?
not on stream right now, and I have no evidence. You're right. Yeah.
It's live streamed, all right? There's no evidence. Once it's gone, right? Please tell me that's true, or I'm going to be mortified forever. But obviously, real talk, that is a big blow to Tyler. Obviously, in actuality, and I'd have to imagine in his perception of the matchup, Tyler is a priest believer, obviously banning it every single time, losing in the first game of the series. I wouldn't be surprised if he was trying to get that deck as his sweeper just to plow through all of Posesi's lineup.
Very possibly. And, that matchup did look free towards the end there, but not for Tyler. I am going to go and look through Tyler's match history to see just how well he lined up against Posesi in the previous series. But yeah, I have to imagine that with Tyler's trump card out of the way, Posesi feeling extremely confident to take the series now.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's 2-0 against Posesi so far in Swiss games, so clearly showing the dominance so far. But Posesi might be able to turn this one around now with a 1-0 win with the Mage. Just getting a single win with that is a big deal, and Priest out of the way is huge. But Tyler does have a couple of powerful decks. Druid in particular is what I'm looking at for him to turn this around. So when we come back, we're going to see the conclusion of this series and whether Posesi can get the sweep done to go and face Surrender in the semi-finals. In the winners bracket match, or if Tyler can turn things around. We'll be back after this. You are watching Hearthstone Grandmasters here on the Hearthstone Esports YouTube page, where all of the action will be brought to you both in Grandmasters and Masters Tour, which is going to be coming in a couple weeks' time, sandwiched in the middle of the Grandmasters season. Should be a lot of fun then. And what is a lot of fun right now, Gia, is watching Tyler give it all this smack talk that he's giving Posesi, and then just getting absolutely dumpstered by the mage. It warms my heart to see.
While I was definitely on you for ragging on Tyler before the series began, after hearing about how intense Tyler's trash talk was, I started to root a little bit for Posesi as well. But I'm going to do my job as a caster and oppose you at every given juncture. So now I am looking at Tyler's Druid to possibly take the win here. This is a different list from what we saw from Surrender. It is now cutting Kael'thas and running the 2 Mount Sellers. What I like to call this is the hedge your bets type of Druid, where you go for different types of game plans. He has 1 Crystal Power, 1 Survival of the Fittest, so it could go in either direction. Yeah,
this is the version of the deck that I can get on board with. I think Mount Seller does have a lot to offer, as I've said last week and this week. Blitzchung's version of the deck definitely felt a bit more focused, which we saw last week with the double Moonfire. But that was, of course, before Broomstick became almost core, you could argue, in Druid, especially amongst the European practice groups, which Tyler is so closely intertwined with. So it does look a little bit confused, like you say, 1 Survival, 1 Teacher's Pet, 1 Growth, 1 Crystal Power, but it's still doing powerful Druid things, especially when you draw yourself a Wild Growth to go right on turn 1.
Indeed. Lightning Bloom and the coin able to play out the Overgrowth immediately. That turn was not entirely straightforward, I have to say, because it's easy to get blindsided by having, the Gidra into Overgrowth Dream Curve, but this is against Mage. A lot of the time, if you're waiting to play Gidra naturally on turn 3, there's going to be something there to oppose it, and that's why I like they're going for the ramp immediately. He'll have a dead turn next turn, but right after that, he'll get the Twilight Runner down.
Now this is a tough choice. I was looking obviously first at Evocation, but I think you got a couple of clues that you can work with here that maybe Devolving Missiles will work. When your opponent goes coin Lightning Bloom into Overgrowth, does that say that they have Guardian Animals to use so much as just like an early beast they want to get down is more what I would read into that.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty solid read to make, but Posesi could also be thinking that Evocation just give him alternate ways of dealing with one of the animals if it comes down early. Against specifically Twilight Runner, you would want specifically Devolving Missiles because it can go through stealth. But against any other beast, just having a Ray of Frost could be fine for the time being.
You know what, the more I think about it, the more I preferred the Devolving Missiles, because I see your point that you could argue that it's only good against that, but for me, there's an inherent anti-synergy between Evocation and Mana Cyclone. Whether or not you find the Sorcerer's Apprentice, are you going to fill up your hand with Evocation and then try and activate Mana Cyclone? If you don't find the Sorcerer's Apprentice, Evocation isn't going to be good for a long time anyway, because you need a lot of mana to make things work. I just think I would have preferred to have seen another cheap spell put into the hand, which does potentially have some very strong synergy.
At the same time, though, I think that you would still require Apprentice to really pop off if you get Devolving Missiles and then Mana Cycle. I mean, now that he's drawn the Ray of Frost Brain Freeze, it does look doable Apprentice, but I'm still seeing Evocation as, because this is generated, it's not the normal one in the deck, you can use it for low value. It's just a panic button, gives you, on a fair amount of times, a Ray of Frost, or just a way of dealing with minions, and he could just use it on a 5-mana turn, and on average, I think it would still work out for him. You could argue about that for a very long time, but we have seen that Star Scryer come into play now, and we'll see if that is enough reason to put it in the deck. Magic Trick. Yeah, all of it requires Apprentice still, huh?
Exactly. Cards everywhere, but just no way to make it work quite yet. That is potentially a Sorcerer's Apprentice right there with the Font of Power, weirdly enough.
I like how you think. Or it's potentially just freeze this and go for a mini Cyclone with 2 in hand. I don't think it's the worst idea. Oh.
Okay.
Also, could be thinking he doesn't need to freeze it because it's just a 2/3. seen a lightning bloom, so he's also not overly afraid of us if it is coming down immediately. But that draw for Tyler makes things a little less straightforward.
I think I like that. I just want to see him get down these threats. If it dies, he has Guardian Animals. If it doesn't, he can go Overflow or just Guardian Animals anyway to try and find more threats. It's going to be very difficult for Posesi to effectively find an answer to both the Mount Seller and the beasts it will generate.
Yeah, I have to assume that Tyler was looking for a way to make sure that he can chain threats. And I was looking for a way to get down the survival of the fittest sooner. But of course, if you're going to go off with Mount Seller, you're going to lose the discount from nature studies.
Sure.
So I think this works out pretty fine. He can still go Guardian Animals next turn and save the Innervate for the survival of the fittest. So he's not he's not all in on the Mount Seller, but he's just putting down enough threats that Mage needs to react.
So Posesi, I think, if he's any kind of a half-decent Mage player, which I think he is, will be quite quickly realizing that unless he turns this game around rapidly, it will be approaching, I have to hit Frost Nova plus Giant to have a chance territory, which doesn't win you games of Hearthstone, to be perfectly honest, most of the time. And so the way that he could turn this around is potentially with a huge Jandis plus freeze if he hits really nutty minions.
There's also just Shenvala Triple Ray that freezes the board, generates a 5/5. It's problematic that you leave up the Mount Seller, but he just doesn't have a way to deal with it. Looks like a secret turn instead. I can't imagine what this accomplishes other than confusing Tyler momentarily, though.
Yeah, this I was not anticipating because it clears out space from his hand, undeniably, for Evocation in case he gets an Apprentice. And maybe this is him saying, if I'm going to have any chance, I need to clear the clunky cards out of my hand and draw Apprentice.
And Tyler was like, huh? That's not Counterspell either? Why would you play a secret then? And that's my question too. Posesi, I think, didn't play anything on board of major impact. Yes, the entity could potentially get him a beast copy, but if it's not the stealth minion, then Tyler gets to trade it down anyway. And the Flame Ward, it did get punished, quote-unquote, by the Overflow. But even if Tyler didn't heal, he still lacks the damage to the rest of the board. I can't help but feel that trying to get on board himself was a better way of approaching it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, because I can understand holding back on the Shenvala. That's something I can understand, because, again, he may be saying, if I don't draw Apprentice, the game ends, which is very possibly true. But just not getting down even Jandis to try and fight back, I think is just not really strong mana utilization.
And I think we have arrived at we hit constant Frost Nova territory in order to have a chance to win. And that is a whiff. Probably just the Arcane Breath because it's the cheapest one.
And I was looking at Ice Barrier just to try and stay alive, but I guess like you just have to hope there's no innovate survival of the fittest for you to have any chance of being alive, obviously.
I suppose this is consistent with last turn. Just 2 secrets played out, hold out another turn for specifically Apprentice.
Yeah.
I will crush your delusions of grandeur.
Okay. Solarian over Vaporized to put the Prime in the deck, potentially, but not sure if Tyler even will kill this off.
Tyler has got to be thinking here, what on earth is happening? Like, what are these secrets that you played this game that you thought could possibly slow me down?
Alright. Tyler said that the matchup was free. It wasn't game 1, it was game 2.
Yeah.
This mage just kind of lied down and died.
Yeah, it didn't draw the Apprentice, right? It didn't get any kind of early development onto the board either. I think that, obviously I'm being somewhat results-oriented here in that if he had gone for the alternate line of going for Devolving Missiles, he would have been able to snipe the Twilight Runner. That's not the only reason why I would like to have seen it, just to instead have a little bit more fluid spells, whereas the Evocation can be a bit clunky unless you hit specifically the Apprentice. But for the most part, I'm trying to find some way that he could have pulled that game back. I think it was just a case of the cards didn't line up and Tyler hit the early nutty hands.
Yeah, It really goes to show also Posesi's mindset when playing the mage deck. Of course, we're not going to see it again from him because this is last Hero standing, but the turns he played secrets consecutively without trying to make any push on the board, it
Yeah.
goes to show that I think Posesi is all in on the apprentice turns. He goes off very, very hard, and he's just trying to survive for specifically that. He does not believe that a board-based approach is good enough, which, that's a valid way of thinking as well, but I would expect to see a little bit more fluidity, perhaps, if we do get to see Posesi on this deck again in a different series. He is, however, queuing up the deck that most players have deemed scary enough to ban every single time.
And he's also playing, in my opinion, the good version of Bomb Warrior. I really like this list he's playing. It's still a little bit different to some of the other versions. In terms of the pirates it's running, it's got 2 Sky Raiders instead of having a Horde Pillager in there as well. But the heart of the deck that I love is basically that you have the Wrench Calibers, you have Krasnov, obviously, but then you have Greenskin, and you have double upgrade as well. These are the buffest weapons that you are ever going to see in a game of Bomb Warrior, and I think it's so perfectly suited to all of the control matchups. You're losing a little bit against aggro, I guess you could argue, by having all these weapon buffs, but I think it's more than worth it.
Yeah, it's very streamlined. It's running 2 of every single card you can run 2 of, and of course the legendaries. So none of those sword and boards that you might see here and there. It's running for the control package, of course, Skipper, Armor Smith, and Battle Rage. And then you also have Blade Storm and Brawl, 2 copies of it, which I definitely like the idea. It looks like it's a refined deck. However, everything can fall apart if you don't actually draw the weapon, and that's happening right now.
Right, which is why it's worth bringing up already that Posesi... Okay. Posesi kept Lord Barov in his starting hand, which is a very reactive card, very powerful card, absolutely. It will guarantee you a clear board at some point. But it does raise some question marks for me in, as you said, exactly, if you don't hit Corsair Cache or Wrench Caliber, your deck doesn't function, straight up.
Yeah, I mean, it's also similar, I suppose, to the question of, do you keep payoff cards in Mage? This one, you keep reactive cards when they're so redundant.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an exaggeration for me to say super redundant. The Blade Storm is conditional to be a full removal, and Brawl is the only wide AoE, so you can make the argument that you actually have more weapon cards in the 2 Corsair Cache and double actual Wrench Calibers than you do non-conditional board sweeps. But it did feel like a very passive choice of card to keep. And suddenly the Druid has the Sarah played and the Dragons already on board.
And weirdly enough, even though we were talking about it being a weirdly passive choice, it may be the only thing that keeps Posesi in this game because of how dominant of a start Tyler has got right out of the gate. I like that he's holding back on the Hidden Oasis here. I think it's correct to assume that this board is more than good enough to keep him in the game for the moment.
But look at the generated dragon. The fact that this evasive dragon can't be targeted and has taunt ruins Posesi's entire game plan. He can't get the swings through without tanking Severin every turn. And he has to hold it because he's in.
I like that he holds off on the clear, though. He could have let rip with Barov's shield slam his own Barov in order to clear off the board. He holds back, though, I think wisely so, trying to snipe off more of the threat. Oh, bless me, sorry about that. From Tyler. And I think he will be rewarded for that, even if he does have to tank 19 damage in the meanwhile.
Posesi's facial reaction there says it all. That's the card he least wanted to see. If Tyler had it with more minions, Posesi would have been like, great, I was planning for that with this Barov keep, but Tyler did the worst possible. He preloaded damage, he made every single threat coming down except for the generated dragons even scarier, and he also didn't commit more minions, so now Posesi has to worry about how he's dealing with the next wave. He does, however, have the double cutting class to try and draw towards that removal instead.
I mean, this hand it's rocking and rolling. He's getting the actual win condition of his deck online. Weapon swings to the face. Blastmaster Boom can come down soon. Deathwing clears off the board. Blade Storm clears off the board. There's still a Barov in play, which will make things that little bit harder for Tyler. It's turning around. I think Posesi's in this game all of a sudden.
That's fair. I mean, Tyler's health does look like an insurmountable mountain at the moment that could turn around at a moment's notice because this is Bomb Warrior. But I feel that the board clears you were mentioning are very conditional, given that Tyler has already played a survival of the fittest. Tyler could be putting down minions that are of varying health totals, so Bladestorm is off the table. They could be big enough that Deathwing only clears 2 out of 3, or 1 out of 3 also. Tyler, however, doesn't have immediate refill available. It's just the 1 minion, and this is the perfect window for Deathwing to actually get work done.
Yeah, I mean, choose what you want, right? Deathwing's insane, Bladestorm's insane if he wants to get down, like, I don't know, Krastenov instead, but I guess you kind of want to just rush that in straight away. It's just powerful fight back from Posesi, attacking face every single turn to try and get that Blastmaster boom for all the boom bots as well later on.
Lined up pretty well. Tyler looking for dragons to refill. Okay, cheap spell, Mount Seller can go off now, but if he does that, he's not necessarily getting down the broom unless it's exactly Innervate from the Wild Growth draw.
I mean, he could try and get lucky, of course, on the Griffin, the Gia special, in just absolutely destroying that off the Mount Seller. But I think he's probably just going to end up going Mount Seller Ironbark Broom instead, if anything.
Oh, it looks so bad to me. I feel like I would take the risk here.
Really?
You can taunt something guaranteed. If you hit a rush or a taunt or the Innervate off the draw, it all ends up pretty well. But Tyler is going to be a lot more cautious in his approach. And it could very well save him in the game.
Tyler absolutely being taunted by this Salit's Pride here, which would draw him both the broomsticks, of course, but they're both in his hand already.
It really... Tyler's decision there really depended on what he felt like the contents of Posesi's hand was. If he had a read somehow on more removal being there and easily getting rid of this, then it doesn't work out for Tyler in the long run. The reason I was advocating for taking the riskier play was I feel like Tyler had to push his advantage while Posesi was still on relatively low health there. I'm not sure if it's the right line, but with the specific answers that Posesi's had so far, Tyler is absolutely on the back foot. However, in an Oasis to heal up.
I mean, he's got so many good draws. Posesi has done an incredible job of turning this around, and the onslaught is not going to slow down. But Tyler just needs that little tiny extra bit of help, and he can very easily get over the finish line.
Secure the deck? Pretty useless at this point. Tyler is relying on the dragons to come flying out of the deck from this excess mana, but he doesn't hit it.
Oh!
This is rough. And Posesi can just slam this Dr. Boom!
I mean, what's even better? Like, he's got green skin, he's got a boom, like, everything's insane. Even a preemptive Socket Sapper. The Socket Sapper's kind of insane. But yes, I suppose you are right. Blastmaster Boom is ridiculous.
Time waits for no one.
I think that buffing his weapon once doesn't speed up his clock anymore, because if you got the boom on board, you probably only need 2 swings anyway.
That's true. I mean, my thinking was more that, like, a preemptive Socket Sapper is pretty good. If they do get a dragon, you can just attack it in and it will go back to the hand. But at the same time, this is a Dr. Boom that summons not 2, but 5 boom bots to go along with it, which does sound more powerful when you put it that way.
Oh my gosh, this was a disaster for Tyler. And I was saying that, or rather defending his strategy of not necessarily banning Warrior, because Druid is a solid counterpick against Warrior. I think that on average it is, but the draw didn't quite work out for Tyler there. Also, we have to note that Posesi keeping the Barov in this playout was absolutely crucial to him surviving.
True.
I'm not sure if it's a keep, but it did win Posesi the game this time.
And again, you just keep the hits coming without even a consideration of slowing down here if you're Posesi. Oh. Like, this is still the same wrench caliber. It has the same amount of durability as an original wrench caliber, but 7 attack that it's swinging with every turn. Disgusting.
I concede.
Yikes.
That was a prime showcase of why people fear Warrior. Why it's being banned so often. Because if you leave that up, sometimes this can just get wins like that. This is last hero standing, it can keep sweeping. And you don't want to be running Ooze in every single deck to just hedge against it. That's why it seems like the most straightforward strategy to ban away Warrior. They obviously did not feel that that strategy was the best. It remains to be seen. We do have a very small sample size of Warrior on stream, but I believe the times it's been left up in Swiss, it got plenty of win.
Yeah, I think it's a great example of a couple of things there from Posesi as well. First of all, like you say, why you ban Warrior. Second of all, why you build Warrior the way that Posesi's done. Because at the end, the 7 attack wrench caliber, there's almost no control deck in the game that can survive that onslaught. You have to proactively kill the Warrior to be able to survive against all that damage. And also, it was just a brilliant showcase of playing the matchup. Like you said, the Brov we can debate back and forth on. It was very powerful there, and I think he played it at the perfect time as well. It was just greedy enough to bait out the necessary removal, the necessary threats from Tyler.
And while you were talking about the 7 attack wrench caliber, one deck that can get weapons on par at attack level is this weapon rogue from Tyler. Heavily reliant on the self-sharpening sword, and I do think that it's got a tough matchup up against the Warrior that runs a lot of removal, has armor to outlast the weapons, but this list from Tyler that has the Steel Dancers is better against specifically Warrior, I would assume.
It's interesting you say that. I mean, I kind of agree with you there in that, yes, if it can stick, it's a big deal, but being able to just have extra damage, I feel like might be even better against Warrior, because what they have is removal. Weirdly enough, what they don't have a lot of the time is enough health gain, you know, because in my experience, the armor smiths don't gain significantly more than 7, maybe 8 armor when you pop off in a single turn, which is often just one swing of a self-sharpening sword later on in the game. So having extra damage, I feel like, is really where the weakness of Warrior resides, which is why I would probably prefer a list with the Hooked Scimitar, as well as maybe Sinister Strikes thrown in there as well. But it's close. I think this matchup is a lot closer than would meet the eye originally.
Now that you've laid out your arguments, I'm forced to look at Posesi's deck list once more, because I'm so used to just gut reaction. If a Warrior has Brawl, Bladestorm, removes, then yes, you would love to have these nice mid-range minions that summon 2 threats at once. But I can definitely see your point, and it's already playing out as early as now. Because Posesi's hand is the aggressive portion of his deck and has hit the early stealth curve, which is awkward for Posesi to deal with. Posesi could be in trouble of just losing too much HP, not being able to swing Wrench Caliber's face, and that's really the point where Warrior begins to struggle. It got to the point where I was even thinking about upgrade coming down that turn to just get rid of the Worgen Infiltrator and possibly the Sneaky Delinquent the next turn before you override it with Wrench Caliber. One thing Tyler's hand does lack, though, while he had the minion curve, doesn't have the self-sharpening sword or even deadly poison to make this hand truly unlocked.
And this is the reason why people have been going for the Hooked Scimitar build, right? It's very, very the deck just doesn't really function when you play when you don't find self-sharpening sword against these slower control matchups. And this is one of the reasons why players have been saying you should cut Steel Dancer, because it's only good when you get self-sharpening sword, broadly speaking. And
oh no, disaster!
What?
Disaster! He played it for a 1 attack dagger, so a 1 cost minimum summon, and it's depth charge, which at the beginning of Tyler's turn is gonna deal 5 to everything. Yikes.
Right. Forget everything I was saying about when cards are good, when decks are good. Rogue is bad when you get depth charge off of your Steel Dancer. That is when the Steel Dancer really sucks.
I'm sorry, I just am remembering what you said about Tyler calling Posesi free, soiling his pants. It's all just a little bit funny right now. I'm so sorry, Tyler.
It's brutal. It is definitely very, very brutal. But he has the card draw. He has Greyheart Sage now. As ridiculous as it sounds, and as far as Posesi is in the lead, there is a glimmer of hope for Tyler here. The smallest glimmer.
I don't, especially with the skipper drop. Posesi is able to clear off that Spy Mistress super easily. Swing again with the green skin. He has the board, he has the weapon, he has the health advantage.
He's in the lead. Make no mistake.
Yeah.
I am not arguing against that.
Tyler has a clear. He can stick his Worgen. But these saps aren't doing anything. And okay, to be fair, even if that was a 1-2 and not a depth charge, which is probably the average outcome if you summon a random 1-drop, I think Posesi would still be in the lead because he would just have to face tank that's Heal Dancer once, and then we would have ended up with a very similar outcome of Risky Skipper clearing small minions. It is just brutal how that specific pan out happened, though.
That's one bomb. Whoa. That is, however...
That's secret passage for 2 more bombs.
Yeah, well, I mean, the interaction is that it goes into your hand. Bombs do not activate when you get them off secret passage, thankfully. So Tyler will have 1 turn of safety at the very least, unless he draws the bomb off the top. He will then instantly die, unfortunately for him, but it's something at the very least.
This is just the most brutal beatdown of Bomb Warrior games I've seen turn after turn. Stab Deathwing, shout out to Akumaker.
Blood and plunder.
I mean, like, if Tyler gets Jandis into Water Bearer and a Rush minion to take out the Deathwing, then, like, he can buy another turn, if nothing else.
Looks like he's just ending it. And you absolutely cannot blame Tyler there. I was so sorry to cut you off from your very valid discussion point of Steel Dancer, should it be played or not. And we can return to that now that the depth charge has done its work and Posesi has given the most stoic thumbs up I've ever seen in my life, which makes Tyler's trash talk even funnier.
The core of the argument, as Tyler gets royally dunked there by Posan, is that I don't particularly like Tyler's build of the Rogue. I think that there are slightly newer versions of the deck that are doing more powerful things. One Sneaky Delinquent I don't think is the way to go. Playing Lillian isn't even necessarily the way that you want to approach the matchup. I think I prefer a higher damage approach in most of the matchups. But all of that aside, I'm not going to dunk on Tyler for having the wrong version of the deck because it was just a disaster from start to finish there. He didn't draw any of the weapons, any of the weapon buffs, but he drew all the cards that need a weapon and weapon buffs. It was the wrong half the deck at the wrong time, and an unfortunate way to end. But for Posesi on the other side, just strong Hearthstone from the Warrior. I think he knew exactly what he was doing right from the get-go, and it really did pay off with his strong play across all the matchups.
And Warrior is a deck where I would say most of the time it is extremely straightforward. You just want the weapon curve, but really saw Posesi, I think, showcase knowledge of the deck was in the Druid matchup. He had the removal saved up for the right times, and while he did take that 1 turn of 19 damage at once, he didn't overreact with the Barov, and that waiting for 1 turn to get more payoff with it while having the Wrench Caliber equipped is what ultimately won him the game there. So that does mean Posesi will be moving forward to face off against Surrender for the winner's match.
It's going to be a good one. Another match of Surrender repping Korea, and of course Posesi repping Japan with Glory and Alutemu nowhere to be seen down in the bottom 8 for the first couple of weeks. But it's not lights out yet for Tyler. He will be moving down to the lower bracket, the elimination match up against Tyler in a couple of games' time. But first of all, as you said, it is going to be Posesi up against Surrender. I think it's going to be a fantastic match of Hearthstone. They consistently are just representing the highest level of play, and I cannot wait to jump into it. So without any further ado, we're going to let them have a breather, get ready for that next match, jump to a short break, and when we come back, the winner's bracket match to see who goes through to the semi-finals on Sunday.